Dead Snow 2 is the well anticipated sequel to the original Norwegian horror comedy Dead Snow, which was released in 2009, and this one being released in 2014. A lot of people were waiting on this one, and I'm quite sure a lot of people are still waiting on Dead Snow 3, although I haven't heard any talk on that one. However, this is a pretty bold and pretty badass sequel, although my heart rests with the original in preference over this one, definitely hands down. Especially in this viewing, I still love this film a lot, but it feels like one of those films that it like the more you watch it, the more it diminishes, but not diminishes, but like it kind of starts to lose its flavor in a sense, its epicness, for lack of a better term. And it doesn't hold that intensity that it had the first or second viewing. Like it delivers a lot, and it delivers it with like a pretty big bang. And it definitely has a lot of enhancements from the first one because it clearly has a bigger budget and you know, more money being able to be thrown at it for effects and more zombies and stuff like that. It's just more of the first one and what the first one had to deliver on a slightly bigger scale too. But it doesn't have that special charm that the first Dead Snow had. This one was also produced kind of strangely. Its main release was fully in English. Now, the first film is fully in Norwegian. Now they added a bonus feature, kind of, to this film, where they had a Norwegian version to it, and the Norwegian version is still half Norwegian and half English. So it's really odd because they chose not to go with dubs. They literally shot this film twice. So the actors are all speaking English, and then the second time, for most of the scenes, they're speaking in Norwegian. So that seems like a lot of effort to do, first of all. And second of all, I don't know why they just didn't have it in Norwegian, being that the first one was all in Norwegian. If they were wondering, like, if it would get them a bigger audience by making the film in English, I don't know. It's a pet peeve of mine. I mean, any film that is taking place in a foreign country, when everybody is speaking English when clearly they wouldn't be, it's a real piss off to me. Films that just make themselves English in other countries, like the 33 did it with Antonio Banderas in it. The recent one that was actually a pretty good movie, but that part pissed me off. What's it called? House of Gucci. Nobody speaks Italian, which they would be speaking Italian, so that doesn't make any sense. It's just a really big gripe I have. It makes no sense. You know, I'm a despiser of dubs anyway, so that's probably why it pisses me off even more because I already can't stand dubbing. But to make a film that is taking place somewhere where nobody would be speaking English, and then they have everybody speak English, usually with accents, which just I don't know. I'm ranting on this whole thing, but it's just a really big pet peeve of mine. Anyways, this film starts exactly where the first one left off, where Martin is in his car and there's Herzog punching through the window, and then they start struggling. The radio starts playing some really cheesy pop Norwegian song, which is actually kind of funny because it doesn't fit for the scene that's going on at all. And he drives off. The Herzog is like holding onto the car, and then he gets hit by a truck, and his arm rips off and remains in the car. So Herzog loses his arm, and the trucker stops the truck, goes out to try to see who he just hit, and starts doing CPR to Herzog, which is a Nazi zombie. So he's giving CPR to a corpse essentially, and Herzog obviously murders him, and Martin gets away for the time being because he falls asleep in his car, and then he just basically crashes off a cliff until he's taken to the hospital. And then at the hospital, during his recovery, the doctors decided to what they think they were doing is reattach Martin's arm because the arm which belonged to Herzog, was found inside Martin's car. So they assume it was his arm, and they reattach it to his body. So now Martin is wielding Herzog's arm, which begins to become superhuman during the movie, and basically he has like superhuman strength on Herzog's arm, and he has no control over it. So the arm basically just does whatever, and obviously nobody believes Martin's story either when it comes to the Nazi zombies from the first movie. Attacking them in the cabin and killing all his friends and all that, and he's basically held responsible until there's this really random scene where this kid somehow makes it into his hospital room, even though it's completely locked up and being guarded by the cops. This random kid who's vacationing with his mom or something makes it into his room, and Martin bribes him to let him out of his straps because he's strapped down to the bed. And he bribes this kid with chocolate, which anytime a grown man is offering candy to a kid, it's always kind of cringe. So I love how they go there. And then the kid is like all excited and unstraps him from the straps, and then he wants his chocolate, and Martin's like, "There's no fucking chocolate, kid." And then his arm unwillingly throws the kid out the window. There's a lot of like violence towards kids and even like infants in this movie. So this film does have the balls to go there, and Tommy Wirkola, the director, definitely had the balls to do things that sometimes would be frowned upon in or in other movies, or that directions of which other directors wouldn't want to go necessarily. And then Martin, after he basically essentially escapes from the hospital, he tries to revive the kid by doing like chest pushes, and he puts his hands right through the kid's chest, which is reminiscent to a few films I've seen in the past. He escapes. He makes it to a war museum. At this war museum, we're introduced to this character named Glenn, and Glenn is played by the same actor who played Roy in the last film, Stigfrid Henriksen. It's clever how they brought him back. I found like sometimes when they bring actors from previous films that have died or whatever, because Roy did die in the first film, and bring him back playing other characters, sometimes it's distracting because you can tell it's the same guy. But in this one, I had to watch this film a few times to even click in and clue in that it's the same actor, but I'm like, holy shit, it actually is. He's a totally different character in this film. He plays Glenn, like I said, who's a very, very flamboyant man, and it's a running joke in the movie that he's afraid of coming out of the closet, and he even like at the end of the movie when he's about to die and right before death, he's like fuck it, and he wants to say it, and he dies before he can finish his coming out line. And yeah, they make that the running joke of the movie, which I'm sure some people would call homophobia and homophobia to his whole character. But I mean, it's funny. It's funny the way it's played out, and it's funny how they write the character. So, but everybody complains about everything. So there's this town called Talvik, and the Nazi zombies are basically planning on invading, and they're coming down the mountain. Herzog is also able to, from one of his like scientist zombie buddies, to get his arm attached to, because in the first film he lost his arm. So somehow his zombie army ended up keeping not Roy, Martin's old arm, and they preserved it in ice or whatever. So they hung on to the arm, and they reattached Martin's arm to Herzog. So they swapped arms basically, and both Herzog and Martin now have the ability to raise the dead. So Herzog raises his own army of Nazi zombies, or basically anybody who's dead he can revive with the arm, and Martin can do the same thing. So throughout the film, they basically raise the dead to fight for them, and they basically summon an army each, and then they have this whole battle in the town of Talvik, and there's a lot of cool gore scenes in this film. A lot of it is a blend between practical effects and CGI, but it definitely is a gore fest. You can't have a Dead Snow film, it seems, without a lot of intestine use. I mean, there's a scene where these Nazi zombies are using intestines to siphon gasoline from tour buses, like go buses at this museum, into tanks using intestines as fucking like hoses to siphon the gas. It is so ridiculous. So many intestines are used for so many kills and so many gross out scenes. It's fucking crazy. Tommy Wirkola just milked it with the intestines. It's fucking crazy. Anybody who's seen this movie will 100% know what I mean when I mention my favorite zombie, which is the wheelchair guy zombie. And he just constantly dies and then gets resurrected for this whole fucking film. And this is how Martin realizes the power that he has in his arm to resurrect zombies, because he closes the zombie's eyes and then the zombie gets up and the zombie's behind him and Glenn. And they don't realize that he's behind him, and he just makes this little moan. And Martin turns around and just whacks him in the face, and then he kills him again because he has a superhuman arm. And then he gets resurrected again, and just over and over. And this poor zombie is being deteriorated like crazy. They use this fucking zombie as traction under the car. When the car is stuck in ice, they put the zombie's legs under the tire, and the tire's just revving and like ripping the zombie apart to get out of the ditch. It's so horrible. Apparently, zombies are not supposed to feel pain, so hopefully this one was unable to feel any of the pain endured to the poor zombie through this film, because there is a lot of zombie abuse. In the case where this zombie could feel pain, there would be a lot of zombie abuse towards this zombie. It's fucking crazy. Yeah, there's some like really mean spirited kills. There's this lady on a wheelchair who's being pushed by another lady, and then the one lady runs away, and the poor lady on the wheelchair has to wheel herself away, and the zombies come over, and she falls backwards, and the Nazi zombies are just slamming her face in. This older gentleman at the beginning of the movie, he's reading a newspaper and or a magazine or something, and he sees like some model in the magazine, and he's like, "Honey, I think you're gonna have to take your teeth out tonight because I'm really feeling like some head." Wow, the writing, fuck. The zombie that I was talking about that just suffers so much abuse gets car sick in one scene, and he just starts vomiting and then eating the barf again. It's fucking great. Oh yeah, another mean spirited kill. How can I forget the strollers, the baby in the strollers, the two women pushing strollers with babies in them, and then the tank fires a shot at them, and this like one infant baby is like shot at the screen. So mean spirited, so mean spirited. And the battle at the end is cool. There's not like as much snow feeling in this one. Everything feels a little bit more like warm, like springtime. Which the settings in this movie are more like in the village areas of the north of Norway kind of thing. And another thing I don't know that I can't really tell about this film is whether a lot of this film is like on location in some villages or if everything is a set, because for lack of a better word, everything seemed to have kind of like a cheap feel with the houses and the backgrounds and stuff like that. A lot of the scenes, like there's they introduce these like goofy cops, for example, and they're in like a police station in this middle, like this little tiny town kind of thing. But this town, when I say it's tiny, I mean it's like minuscule, and there's nobody else in the town. It's just these cops. Now I don't know if they're going for the joke where nothing happens in this town and the cops are always bored and have nothing better to do other than eat donuts and look at seagulls, because they make seagulls a running joke in this film too. But the villages just feel empty. Like it feels like a staged set that has no characters in it. Like they didn't have enough background characters or something like that. That's the way it feels anyway. And the houses in certain scenes feel very box like, and that's why I was saying they kind of have that cheap feel. But I'm not sure, like that could just be like I don't know. I haven't been to Norway, so it might be a realistic look of like the north of Norway, because this film takes place like way north in Norway. Finnmark is basically the whole northern Norway, northern Finland area, and the villages might be very small up there. I don't know 100%, but it just felt small scale. I think that's the best way I can describe it. It really felt small scale when it came to the sets. Another thing that was I kind of felt meh on is the whole zombie squad characters. They really had their funny moments. I think the Star Wars girl was hilarious. She wears the "It's a Trap" shirt. Very good looking girl too, and she's always constantly making Star Wars references. She actually mentions that the Hoth scenes, and it's funny because I'm doing a Star Wars review series along, like, while I make this video. I'm still working on that, so I've been watching a lot of Star Wars, more than usual anyway. And she says the Hoth scenes in Star Wars were filmed in Norway. Now, whether that's an actual fact, I don't know, but she does mention that in the movie. And they were funny at times, like I said, but they definitely feel a little bit one note. And a lot of the jokes involving the zombie squad definitely fall flat sometimes. So they're kind of a mixed bag. They're not as funny as they could have been, and they're kind of flat with the humor sometimes. But they're not all bad. I just found a lot more of the humor came from like Glenn and Martin's character and their banter and their friendship, and even the cops. They were just the cops, like the whole humor, like dumb cops kind of thing was that could have just been left out altogether. But I understand how they wanted to put more like body to the film kind of thing and have more of a side story going on with the police and stuff. So I get it, but it did feel a little bit unnecessary too. And yeah, the gore effects and the humor that came with like the splatter and stuff, and the whole zombie battles were cool, and the tanks looked cool, and as a follow up, it's good because they do expand a lot of the things that was going with the first film. I just found the first film was so filmed. I can't even speak. Was so filled with charm, and it just did the independent horror comedy movie so perfectly. Like, it's almost flawless, that first film. And it doesn't overstay its welcome, and it's just perfectly done for a horror comedy. And this one, although it expands a lot of the elements from the first one that made the first one so great, some things are just not as epic as they could be, and I guess not as memorable as they could be. Because like I said at the beginning of this review, this film I think definitely held a lot more merit, my first and second viewing, and my first few watches I should say, than it did like rewatching it a whole bunch. Not to discredit it completely though, because I'm not saying that, this is something I never want to watch again. It's just definitely not something I would throw on as much or recommend as much as the first film. And the first one is so perfect standing alone that this one is kind of just like squeezing out the remains kind of thing. Fangoria says excellent. Film Threat says a blast. Bloody Disgusting says bigger and badder, which is pretty true. And IndieWire says genuinely funny. Sure is. Blu-ray.com says incredibly fun. So a lot of short and sweet reviews on that one. And I don't know if this one just didn't bring in the budget or the attention to merit a third film. Maybe that's why we haven't heard of one or any talk on one in such a long time. But Tommy Wirkola already has gone on to do many other projects and still working and doing really great stuff. I haven't seen a lot of his newer stuff, to be honest, but I do know he has. I've seen his name pop up in the horror community a lot. So there's definitely a lot of big Tommy Wirkola projects, and I love like the returning of Martin, like some of the actors from the first one, and they couldn't have ended this film off on such a charming, hilarious note than to have Martin go and resurrect his ex who died in the first film, Hannah. And of course they fuck in a car, which technically is considered necrophilia. I mean, he is fucking a dead woman. So Necrophilia right there. And then of course the zombie, my favorite zombie who kept being resurrected over and over, starts walking at the end of the movie with like his little cane and he's all smiling at them having sex. Except he wasn't resurrected at the end of the movie. He got hit by a tank and then at no point do we see Martin resurrecting him. So how he got resurrected is not explained or doesn't make sense. But I mean, having that character show up again doesn't need an explanation. He's literally probably in the top three characters of the movie, and he's a freaking zombie. You can imagine a zombie being one of the best characters in a Dead Snow movie. So yeah, Herzog of course is just as badass as he was in the first movie. There's some good like choreographed fight scenes. I like the one between him and Martin in the house, and then the tank of course comes through the house, and then they end up on top of the tank somehow. Magic of fucking movie making, and that fight was cool. And then their fight on the tank is cool. Right before Herzog gets his head blown off by the tank. Even though he's standing there and the gun of the tank is aiming closer and closer to his head, and for some reason he can't hear it. He can't hear the tank approaching, nor the fucking gun going, and he's literally right there. Maybe, I don't know, Herzog has a hearing problem? Wasn't explained before, but anything's possible. It's a fun movie. It's a fun movie if you liked the first one. It's an extension of the first one. That's probably the best way I could, or the best term I could come up with is an extension of the first one. Not a necessary extension, but an enjoyable extension nonetheless. My preference strongly goes to the first one, but that's kind of obvious, and I'm sure a lot of people feel the exact same way when it comes to both of them. And it's just a fucking pet peeve that they just didn't only make this in Norwegian, and why they had to make the main version English. Like the movie, it's just English, and the fucking Norwegian version, where it's half Norwegian, half English, is a special feature. It's not even like it includes two versions, but the main release, you could say, is fully in English to market to more people. I don't know. I don't know. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense, like I said, but I'm not going to go into that rant again. I'll leave it there. Subscribe to Morgan Film Fan if you like to listen to my voice, or if you like my film reviews. I'll be back with more soon. Stay tuned for those. Check out what's on the channel already. Stay tuned for what's coming. Until next review, have a good one. Take care and cheers.